analysts, as you probably know by now, have been cheering a Donald Trump victory. Investors are encouraged by promises of less regulation and big spending on things like infrastructure. But the big question is Trump taking the US economy down something of a very dangerous path? I'm joined now by Bart Chilton, the former Commissioner of the United States Commodity Futures Trading Commission, or CFTC for short. He's live for us from Washington, D.C. this morning. Bart Chilton, thank you for coming on the show, and good morning.
Good morning, Nina. Good to be with you.
Regulations. Donald Trump has promised to repeal a number of regulations, including the Dodd-Frank Act, which was brought in after the big crisis, financial crisis of 2008. Do you think he's really going to go ahead with that? Because that seems to be one of the things that Wall Street is pretty optimistic about.
Yeah, well, the thing about Dodd-Frank, this is that large financial reform, the largest in 80 years, is that it required increased capital and margin requirements from some of these very large investment institutions, the large banks, so that the economy is actually safer, and that protects average consumers. So I'm not sure that he's actually going to want to go down that road of outright repeal of Dodd-Frank, but there certainly will be some changes. And in the past, the House Republicans here in the States have tried to do that. And so I will look for some marginal changes to the financial reform law here in the U.S., but not outright repeal, Nina.
And how concerned are you about that? As a former regulator, you've been in charge of levying huge multi-billion-dollar fines on U.S. financial institutions and also big ones from abroad.
Yeah, we have. I mean, the LIBOR scandal, hundreds of millions of dollars when I was at the agency. And you know, I am concerned about a pullback. Now, there are some places that it would make some sense. I think small banks were overregulated with Dodd-Frank, and we want to make sure they're okay. But with regard to ensuring that the unregulated markets, that's the over-the-counter markets that had zero, zip, not a regulation, that's something that regulators are doing now, Nina. And I just can't imagine that the president-elect really want to go back to those days, the area of the economy that got us into the most trouble and led to this large economic Great Recession.
You were quoted as saying that Trump, if he were to win, would be, quote, exceedingly harmful to stock markets. That was just about 10 days before the U.S. elections. Now we have a president-elect, Donald Trump. Markets haven't reacted as though he would be exceedingly harmful to them. In fact, we've seen a bit of a bounce after Donald Trump was elected.
We've seen 6 of 7 trading days up generally. In that night, you saw, the election night, you saw markets really tank. I mean, from the Nikkei to the Dow futures, down 4, 5, even 6% on some. And it wasn't until Mr. Trump came out and really appeared graceful and had a lot of humility. And at that point, the markets shifted on a dime, and the financial futures at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange operated smoothly. Market makers, the high-frequency traders and others came in and provided the other side to all the bets. And markets have been on sort of a tear since then, on a good tear. But I think it's also tenuous, and you never know what's going to happen here. Whether or not there's the confidence and the credibility in the policy provisions that the president-elect puts forward remains to be seen. We think it's going to be good with regard to markets because he will reduce some regulations, as we were just talking about, reduce taxes, and then have stimulus to the economy through the fiscal policy. But the verdict still remains to be seen. What will happen, Nina?
I want to ask you very briefly, there's a lot of concerns about the dismantling of certain key institutions, and notably the independence of the Federal Reserve could be in jeopardy. Are you concerned about some of the things Donald Trump has said about the Fed?
Well, as you were reporting just a moment ago before where we talked, I mean, a lot of this may have been sort of political posturing in the election. And quite frankly, some of his policies that are pretty far out there, I'm hoping that they were more rhetoric than reality. And I think the Fed issue may be one of those. As you said, you know, Ms. Yellen says she's going to stay till the end of 2018. I get more concerned about places like we have a new agency in the U.S., the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which some have said should go away. That's done a great job, uncovered recent frauds that are occurring. So I'm more concerned about the CFPB than I am about the Fed. I think we're going to be okay with regard to the regulatory agencies.
All right. Bart Chilton, the former head of the CFTC, thank you very much for joining us there. A man